At 12:50 a.m., a man places a frantic call to 911 from a dark stretch of highway in rural Texas. He tells the dispatcher that he's being chased. He says that he's bleeding. Then, in a strained and panicked voice, he says something that would haunt investigators for years. "Yes, I'm in the middle of a field. There's some guys chasing me."
Yes, I'm in the middle of the field. The safe just pushed some guys over. Right here going towards Javelin on both sides. My truck ran out of gas. There's one car here. Got chasing to the woods. Please hurry.
The dispatcher asks him where he is. But before any clear answers can be given, the call suddenly cuts out. That man was Brandon Lawson, and despite recorded phone calls, extensive search efforts, and more than a decade of investigation, authorities still don't know whether Brandon was running from real people that night or from something that only he could see. What happened after that call is the part of this case that almost no one can explain. Brandon Lawson was 26 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was a father of 4 living in San Angelo, Texas. Those closest to him describe Brandon as deeply devoted to his children and fiercely protective of his family. He stayed in regular contact with his loved ones and was known to check in often, especially when he was traveling. However, Brandon's life was not without struggle. For several years, he had battled substance abuse, including methamphetamine use. This aspect of his life would later become central to how people interpreted his disappearance. But it's important to clarify one thing early on. Prior to his disappearance, Brandon had never vanished before. He had never abandoned his family, and he had never made a desperate call to 911 claiming his life was in danger. In early August of 2013, Brandon and his girlfriend LaDessa had an argument. Following a dispute, Brandon left their home and decided to drive to his father's house in Crowley, Texas. He never arrived. Just after midnight on August 8, 2013, Brandon was driving along U.S. Highway 277 near the small town of Bronte, Texas. At some point during the drive, his truck ran out of gas. On its own, this would not have been unusual or alarming. What happened next, however, was anything but normal. Instead of remaining in his vehicle to wait for help, Brandon called his brother, Kyle Lawson. Kyle later recalled that Brandon sounded panicked and out of breath, as if he were running or hiding. During the call, Brandon told Kyle something that immediately raised alarm. He said that there were men chasing him. Kyle tried to calm his brother down and asked him where he was, but Brandon could not give a clear location. Before Kyle could get any useful information, the call abruptly disconnected. Moments later, Brandon dialed 911. The 911 call would later become one of the most unsettling pieces of evidence in this case. During the call, Brandon tells the dispatcher that he needs help. He explains that he is bleeding and insists that people are chasing him. When the dispatcher asks for his location, Brandon responds by saying that he is in the middle of a field. His voice sounds strained and rushed, suggesting that he may be moving or attempting to hide. At one point, Brandon clearly says, "I need the cops."
Yeah, no, I need the cops.
The dispatcher attempts to keep him talking and gather more information, but the audio is unclear and fragmented. Brandon never provides a precise location. Without warning, the call disconnects. Brandon Lawson is never heard from again. After losing contact with his brother, Kyle immediately drove toward the area Brandon had described. Along Highway 277, Kyle discovered Brandon's pickup truck parked on the shoulder of the road. The vehicle was not wrecked. and it did not appear to have been abandoned in a hurry. The doors were locked, the headlights were turned off. The gas tank was completely empty. There were no visible signs of a struggle and no indication that Brandon had been injured near the vehicle. Kyle repeatedly called Brandon's phone. Eventually, Brandon answered. However, he didn't speak. Kyle later said that he could hear faint background noises on the line, possibly movement or footsteps, before the call disconnected. This was the last confirmed contact with Brandon Lawson. Law enforcement quickly launched a large-scale search operation. Police officers, helicopters, search dogs, thermal imaging equipment, and volunteer groups all combed the surrounding area. The terrain was harsh and unpredictable, consisting of open fields, oil wells, ravines, and wildlife. Though, despite days of searching, nothing was found. No blood was located, no clothing was recovered, and no remains were ever discovered. Even trained tracking dogs were unable to follow Brandon's scent beyond the edge of the roadway. It was as if Brandon had disappeared the moment he stepped off the highway. As the investigation stalled, several theories emerged. One possibility was that Brandon experienced drug-induced paranoia. Investigators confirmed that he had used methamphetamine earlier that night, and some believe this caused him to panic and flee into the surrounding fields, where he may have died from exposure or injury. However, this theory raises serious questions, particularly the complete absence of physical evidence. Another theory suggests that Brandon may have died accidentally, possibly by falling into an unseen ravine or oil well. While this is plausible given the terrain, repeated searches over many years have failed to uncover any trace of him. The most unsettling theory is that of foul play. If Brandon truly believed he was being chased, the question becomes who was after him, and how someone could disappear so completely without leaving evidence behind. Over the years, Brandon's 911 call has been re-examined countless times. Some listeners believe they hear phrases such as, "I ran into them,"
I certainly ran into him.
or "they're right here."
There's one car here, got shaken.
Others interpret the audio differently. The recording is not clear enough to provide definitive answers. What is clear, however, is that Brandon was terrified in his final known moments. Brandon's family never stopped searching for him. They organized private search efforts and returned to the area multiple times, hoping to find answers that law enforcement could not. As the years passed, Brandon's children grew up without knowing what happened to their father. There were no remains, no official explanation, and no closure. Only unanswered questions. For years, the disappearance of Brandon Lawson remained one of the most baffling missing person cases in the U.S. But in February of 2022, nearly 9 years after Brandon vanished, something finally changed. Human remains were discovered less than a mile from where Brandon's truck had been found on Highway 277. The area was part of private property that had not been thoroughly searched in the early days of the investigation. Alongside the remains, searchers also found clothing consistent with what Brandon had been wearing on the night he disappeared. At the time, authorities could not immediately confirm the identity of the remains. Years of exposure to the elements had made forensic analysis difficult, and answers did not come quickly. For Brandon's family, the waiting continued. Then, in late 2024, DNA testing finally provided confirmation. The remains belonged to Brandon Lawson. After more than a decade of uncertainty, the question of whether Brandon was alive was finally answered. but the questions surrounding how he died only became more complicated. Despite the discovery of Brandon's remains, investigators have not publicly determined a cause of death. Due to the condition of the remains, no clear evidence of foul play, injury, or specific medical cause could be identified. In other words, the discovery brought closure to one question, but not to the case itself. We still do not know what Brandon encountered after he left the highway. We still don't know who he believed was chasing him, and we still don't know what caused the fear evident in his final phone calls. The mystery did not end with the discovery of his remains. In many ways, it deepened. Brandon Lawson was found, but the truth about what happened to him may never be fully known. What's going on, everybody? I am 3C4R3, or Scars, if you didn't know. That's what it means, Scars. I know, corny, whatever. But I want to tell you all, thank you so much for watching. Each and every one of you, you all mean so much to me. And you guys are just helping me get closer and closer to my dreams of doing YouTube. Since I was a little kid, I've been wanting to do this. And I took it. I took my chance, and you guys are helping me get to it. And I love all of you, and I appreciate everything you guys do for me. But other than that, I really hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys very soon for the next one. Thank you.